What you gonna do when it all comes back to the place that you never wanted it to come back to? And where you gonna roll when the bottom drops out and you got no place to go? Who you gonna trust when trust is a must? You better roll with the rest of us. So pack your bags and all the faith you can, cause it's about ready to hit the fan. Come to the ready. 2012 brought about the re-election of an antichrist. Come to the ready. You don't believe me, just look deep into the soul of the lion's eyes. Come to the ready.
Good evening. My name is Pierce Kibbe. I am the founder and chief instructor of Practice Inc., a local and veteran-owned business here in Lakeland, Florida. This evening, what we're actually going to talk about, or begin to talk about, is situational awareness. Keeping your head on a swivel. What is it? And we're going to touch on the 6 domains of it. Okay, but we're going to do this, like they say, how you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. In regards to that, this is going to be a 7-video series. And it's going to go over the 6 domains of it and establishing your baseline. Now, just like when you build a house or anything like that, you have to start with that foundation. And for situational awareness, that foundation is your baseline. So what is it? Now, this presentation was actually done at the Self-Reliance Expo here in Lakeland about a month and a half ago. Got some really great reviews on it by some very well-regarded folks. And I can do this for your business, your company, or whatever, but I did want to put this out there. There's so much out there about situational awareness and keeping your head on a swivel and paying attention to your surroundings, but there is so little out there of what that actually means. And that's what this is for. It's to break that down so you can really understand what you're looking for. If you're looking for the sky to fall and you're looking around all the time, sooner or later you'll see something and you may think the sky is going to fall. This is to help give you a solid foundation, just like any of my other classes or courses would be, and then allow you to build up from there. So this one is going to be about your baseline. So, I apologize if this is a little bit fuzzy. I am trying to work with the camera and also do this at the same time with the PowerPoint. So, anyways, what we're going to go through is just work through these slides that we have up here, okay? Again, my name, Practice Inc. is the company, and my name is Pierce Kibbe, and motto is making tactical practical. So first and foremost, I would typically ask you what your definition of situational awareness is. Now, you're more than welcome to put any of that in the comments that you would like. That's what that is for. I'm not in front of you doing this live, otherwise you would actually have the opportunity to kind of type in and respond back. So feel free, once I post this, to go ahead and include anything you want. I'm not going to cover everything, because realistically, A, that would really need to be done in person, and B, there's just so much to go over. This is just to get you the basics of establishing that baseline and understanding what anomalies and different things to look for. So, per Wikipedia, and you can, take that or leave that how you may, but that's what we're using. The perception of your environmental elements and the events with respect to time or space, the comprehension of their meaning, and the projection of their status after some variable has changed. That variable can be time, it can be some other variable such as a predetermined event, special event, a large event, holidays. We're coming up on a very busy holiday season with regards to Christmas and Thanksgiving and Halloween. So, it also involves being aware of what is happening in the vicinity to understand information and how that information, the events, and one's own actions will impact goals and objectives, both immediately and in the future. So in layman's terms, you're just paying attention to your surroundings, and that's been put out there numerous times by various other folks. Pay attention to your surroundings, okay? You're looking for those anomalies. Now, minding the fact that there are variables in there, that is your big focus that you're trying to pay attention to once you're establishing that baseline for that environment. That baseline can be very quick if it's an area that you're very familiar with, or it can be a very long drawn out area if you've got more time. So, what does situational awareness mean to you, and how can it hinder you? Again, These are a lot of questions where it's a back and forth with the audience, right? So my audience, it's through this video camera, so just write down your comments in there, okay? Do you already have a system that you utilize? There are plenty of systems out there. Some of them that I started out using when I first started out doing executive protection and contract security and different things. Not one is the best for all methods, and not one is infallible, right? They all have their pros and they all have their cons. But do you have a system that you already utilize? And in that, do you consistently practice with that system? And how? How do you utilize that system on a daily basis, a weekly basis? Is it something that's simple enough that not only can you use it, but your family can incorporate it to their level, whether you have young kids or older kids? Have you learned anything from that method? And do you feel that it's an effective method? Like with any other skills and gear and clothing and different things, you find out that some things work better than others. And hopefully as you go through that, you're either downsizing some of the gear or actually honing in on the better quality gear, right? So with that system, and if you are not practicing it, and you're understanding how you're doing it, hopefully you're learning from that system and experimenting with it different ways and seeing that system may not work 100% of the time in this area for an urban area, but then you go to a rural area and it works a lot better, or vice versa, or at a special event, concert, different things like that. Do you have any current drills that you use to help develop that? Is it something that somebody else taught you? Is it something that you've learned from somebody else? Is it something that you've learned on your own by practicing some of these drills and you went, you know what, how could I better improve this? What is it that you do? One of the drills that I have and training things that I have my students do when they're coming in for firearms training or concealed carry or disaster preparedness or any other sort of training is to, at the beginning of the week, once they're done, is to go pick a color of a shirt. And at the beginning of that week on a Monday, you pick that one color of the shirt, and during that week, you catalog how many times during that week that you actually see that color shirt. Now, make it a little bit harder on yourself, and of course you can experiment by making it with brighter colors, but try to make it more like earth tones, tones that usually would blend in better. The browns, the blacks, the grays, the khakis, those different types of colors that really aren't going to stick out to you as much as a neon green or a neon pink or something like that, right? Because it actually makes you pay attention to your surroundings. Now, through the week, what you should notice is between day one and the end of the week, you're going to see that color a lot more. Well, why? Well, think about it. You're actually paying attention. You're actively or proactively looking for that color. You can do the same thing with cars. You can do it with a lot of other areas. Case in point, if you've ever bought a new or even a used car, so new to you car, and you think, oh, I really love that car. I want to go out and get that car, right? You go out, you buy that car. As soon as you drive up to the parking lot with it, what do you see? You see that car all over the place, or you see that color of that car all over the place. And you think, oh my gosh, I just yesterday, I didn't see this car anywhere. Now today, I'm seeing this car. Well, why is that? Because now you're consciously aware of what's going on. You're paying attention because now you drive that car, or you have that color vehicle. So you're paying more attention to that. And now that's why you see it everywhere. How can it be improved? Can you modify that drill? Absolutely. One of the things that I've learned doing executive protection over the last decade is that we're doing some surveillance and counter surveillance or surveillance detection. And I thought I was pulling one over on a training class that I was doing on surveillance detection. And I changed. I had an extra shirt in my pocket, in my cargo pants pocket, and a hat. And I threw that on and I thought, oh yeah, I'm being slick. No, I wasn't. Why? Because the one thing that people don't typically change is their shoes. So shoes is another really great one to fit in and see, okay, do those shoes match the baseline of this environment? If I'm going to church, what do I typically see? Something along dress shoes, browns, blacks, something like that. Some shoes that may not or may stick out to me are going to be something like combat boots, something that's a tactical boot. Do most people wear that? No. And if somebody is wearing that, why? Does their clothing match with those? Do I notice any bulges along their waistline, or are they carrying a weighted backpack? Are they dressed for the environment? Those are anomalies that I'm going to pay attention to and pick up when doing church security. or protection for the pasture as what fits or what is happening that shouldn't, or what isn't happening that should. And that's why you're doing that baseline. And always look on improving, right? Don't ever stick and go, you know, this is the way we've been doing it, this is the way I'm going to stick with it. Always look on ways that you can hone it and improve it. So how can it hinder or help you? So pros. Can the training, the drills, can they be as simple as you want? Absolutely. Why? Well, with training and practice, you're going to be able to narrow things down and understand, okay, that works, this doesn't, and understand that it needs to be flexible, okay? Different environments are going to call for a little bit adaptation to the drills, you know, what that baseline is, right? But what do we invariably do a lot of times? We make it more complex than it needs to be. Ask anybody that's been a medic like myself in the military as a Fleet Marine Force corpsman. I started off first when I deployed with my Marines. I started off with a bag weighted down with all sorts of gear. Why? Well, I'll need it. You know, they get cut, heat casualties, anything like that. I know that I'll need IVs and different stuff like that. What did I learn? I learned that by cross-training my Marines in how to do IVs, but more appropriately actually having them, before we went on long ruck marches or whatever, having them have their own pre-staged IV with a bag, you know, the line set on it, the catheter ready, alcohol swab, gloves, tourniquet, all that stuff. If I had that in the right cargo pocket all the time, it is one less thing that I had to carry. Much less, you start throwing in 6,000 cc's of IV fluid, that medic bag, along with all your other gear and your rifle and everything, gets really heavy really fast. How do I minimize that? Well, training and practice. I learned I can't do it all, but teamwork. I incorporated them, helped train them, get them to understand how to do it, the purpose of it, and then had them start carrying their own gear. So, can it be proven to work in multiple locations and environments? What can change? Well, colder areas or different locations, depending on the time of year, it will be colder. So here in Florida, during the summer, most people aren't going to be wearing really heavy jackets. However, I go up further north or out west where I change that time to this time of year now, in the middle of October, that's going to change. Now I'm going to be expecting to see layered clothing. I'm going to be expecting to see beanies or heavier duty jackets. But of course it can seem overwhelming. Why? Well, if you're making it more complex than it needs to be and not simplifying it, then it's going to be very overwhelming because you're trying to take in all these different things and people are telling you over here, oh no, you got to pay attention to your surroundings. Oh no, you got to keep your head on a swivel. Oh, you just got to be ready. You got to be looking at everything and taking everything in. Well, your mind can't do that. It gets overwhelmed. We're really good at focusing on one thing at a time and doing it. Now, a lot of folks feel that they can multitask really well, and you can, but you're going to have that degradation of the quality over the time, the more things that you add in there. So when you're looking at that baseline, you're looking for clusters of different things that will stick out to you, right? And keep it very simple. You're going to have increased recognition of your environment or vulnerability. The more that you start stopping and paying attention to that environment, the more you're really going to realize what is going on. But realize that it's not infallible. It cannot and you cannot remain 100% aware 365 days a year, 24/7. Anybody that has ever served as a point position in the military will understand it is very mentally and very physically exhausting over time. And take into account all the other things that you're doing throughout the day. Here you are supposed to pay attention to your surroundings, keep your head on a swivel, and then you got to go pay these bills, and then you got to get to work, and then you got to pick up the kids, and oh, maybe you have some else special event or a church thing or a holiday event or a birthday party. It's very overwhelming, and if your kids are in sports or anything like that. So what do you need to do? You need to simplify, right? So by breaking it down into just those 7 main areas, it will help you instead of trying to pay attention to 100 different things. What about that? What about that? What about that? Because you will miss stuff. Or as you're trying to look for stuff, you will find it, but it won't be what you thought that it was. Can it be a valuable tool when utilized properly? Absolutely. It is a very eye-opening experience to go out there and actually pay attention to your surroundings and have a better idea of what you're trying to pay attention to. But it heavily relies on your senses, right? And think about this, especially at night, those senses are going to be significantly reduced. As human beings, we rely most heavily on our vision. And we're binocular creatures, so we really rely on both eyes to take in depth perception, as much of our surroundings, somewhat of our peripheral, and see everything that's going on. But at night, that drastically reduces. And of course, that fear of the unknown, that fear of the uncertainty can come into play. But if you have a system, and it's a good quality system, you will have more confidence. And therefore, that fear of the unknown won't be as big of a deal, because you'll have a better idea of what to look for. So when you're establishing a baseline, what does that mean? A baseline is of your environment, and it consists of observing and understanding what fits in and what doesn't based on your location, your environment, the climate, the clothing, the emotion of interaction, and of course behaviors. Okay? Understand that all of these can change depending on the time of year, if there's special occasions going on, and of course the geography. Remember, as you're going in between different states during different times of the year, some clothing is going to be more in place, other clothing is going to be out of place. You know, you can typically tell a tourist in your area, especially if you're in a small town, because they don't fit that baseline. They're wearing clothing that doesn't fit in. You can pretty much spot them out here in Florida pretty easily on when somebody's a tourist. Why? You know what fits in and what doesn't in your daily lives, right? But you have to take the time to observe it. And you think, well, wait a minute, I don't have the time. You don't understand my schedule. Well, that's true. I don't understand your schedule, and nor do you understand mine. But what I do understand is by taking the time, or making the time, to pay attention to that baseline, you will get more consistent with it, and it will become more commonplace, right? The more you practice it, the smoother it becomes. The less little things that come out of nowhere are going to bother you, and you're going to focus on the really important ones. And you're going to look for those clusters about body language, about atmosphere, of how somebody's behaving, you know, about all those biometric cues and the different things that we're going to go over the next week. Because I am going to put this out over a week period of time. There's 7 different things, so over a week. As we talked about, you're focusing on those anomalies, right? So what is happening that shouldn't, or normally doesn't? What isn't happening that should, or normally does? So what does that mean? Well, think about the areas that you go to very often, whether it's the bank, whether it's your kid's school, whether it's a sporting event, whether it's going to the grocery store. There are things that you're used to of the norm because you go there all the time, and you're just so programmed on autopilot to go, well, I need to go get this. You know where everything is in there. You have an idea. It's not quite like Cheers where everybody knows your name depending on where you go, but you get a better feel for that environment. You know, think about this. You ever walked into an area or an elevator, a conversation at work or something around the house, and you went, you know what? This is kind of awkward. Why? You felt like that tension you could cut with a knife. Well, why? Because that atmosphere was very tense. Now, you may not know why, but you understand without having to go in there from facial expressions, from body language, from your own experiences. Think about this. A lot of people have been in fights or seen enough fights that they understand some different things. If you see somebody standing there and their face is really red and their fists are clenched and maybe they're shaking, what is that going to tell you? It could tell you a couple things, but one of them is there's a lot of tension there. That could be a possible fight. What about if now they got their fingers up in their face, or they're crowding in on you or somebody else and really getting in close to you and yelling and screaming at you or somebody else? You understand, again, atmosphere. That's a very tense situation. Now that's posturing. Again, that's body language, and we will go into that actually tomorrow. But understanding what those anomalies are and how to read them will make you better understand what fits in and what doesn't. And it will be very smooth as time goes on. But that's why you practice those drills. Teaching survival, teaching many other things. What the method we typically teach is stop. Okay, everybody understands stop, right? Very universal, verbal and non-verbal language. Everybody understands this. Even kids, they may not want to admit it, but they do know, hey, Stop it. That's enough, right? So what do? Well, we break that down, okay? Stop, the S part stands for stop. Very simple, right? The T stands for think. So you're stopping and you're thinking, okay? O, observe. Okay, so what am I observing? I'm observing that environment. I'm observing that baseline and going, what fits in, or what is happening that shouldn't? What isn't happening that should? If I go into that normal store, that gas station or whatever, and I look over to the counter and the clerk is standing there very tense, nervous, shaking, sweating profusely, very quiet, normally 99 times out of 100, I will walk in there, hey, how's it going, Pierce? Good to see you. How you been? How's the wife? How's the kids? You know, all that different stuff. That would be the norm. That would fit the normal baseline. But if I go in there and see that, I should have that sixth sense, that gut feeling, the hair standing up on the back of my neck, that something is not right. Is there somebody else near that cash register? Are they focused on them? Is there anybody else in the store? Now, hopefully, I had my own due diligence. And before I went into that building, that location, whatever, I was already looking and taking in as much of that environment as I could before I walked into that situation. Why? Because proactive versus reactive is always going to be a better approach. You never want to be acting or reacting to a situation if you can help it, because action versus reaction will always be slower. Action will always win. Why? Well, because with that reactionary gap, where you're having to recognize the action and or the intent, whether it's a not good intent or whether it is a good intent, it's good nature, right? So once you recognize that intent for what it is, better or worse, now you have to formulate a plan. Well, depending on how recent you have training or experience, depends on how quickly you're going to formulate a plan. Whether it's accessing your short-term memory because you recently had exposure or experience to this, training or otherwise, or is it going to access that long-term memory because your brain now has to go, okay, when's the last time we had some exposure or saw or heard something about this? Now what happens if I haven't had any exposure to this? Well, that's where that fight, flight, or freeze comes into play. So during this recognition phase, depending on how quickly, whether it's a short-term memory or long-term memory or any memory at all, depending on how long that takes to do, you're typically frozen during that time. Or you just freaked out and you just ran away. Or you recognize the situation for what it is and you didn't freak out, but you still made the action and formulated that plan going, I need to get out of here and go get some help. And that best plan for you was to get out of there, right? So you formulated that plan, and then most importantly, you acted upon that plan. So it takes a little bit of time, right? For action versus reaction, somebody else is already initiating that action. Now you're having to react. Recognize it for what it is, formulate a plan, and now you have to act upon it. And whatever you act upon, you have to be very decisive with it and often aggressive with it and not second guess yourself. I know I'm just as guilty as many others out there of going to take a test and I'm going back, reviewing my answers, and I think, oh, you know what? I don't think that's the answer. And I change it. And you know what? I was wrong. That was the answer. Why? I second guessed myself. I didn't trust my instinct. My instinct was, oh, right there. Hey, I crossed it out and made B, C, or D, but I was wrong. So stop for S, think, observe, and then plan. And as we talked about with your plan, once you formulate a plan, be aggressive with it, be decisive about it, and don't second guess yourself. Follow through with it, right? Whatever it is, for better or worse, follow through. There are plenty of stories of folks out there that survive situations that they really shouldn't have. But they did because they just followed through with that plan. It may not have been the best plan. It may not have even followed their training. But they still survived because they didn't second guess themselves and they didn't stop. They just followed through with it. So like we talked about, be decisive, be aggressive, don't second guess or hesitate, and follow through. Once you make that act and that plan, follow through with it. And like we talked about, action versus reaction, right? So color codes is situational awareness. And that's per Colonel Jeff Cooper's Principles of Self-Defense. It's one of the first books that I was told to read when I got into contract security and different things. And it helped me with my foundation. But that's what that was the best basis for, was a foundation for me, taking a lot of years of time and experience, good and bad, to realize there is more in depth to what the situational awareness means, and I can't pay attention to everything. So what else is there? And that's how this came to be, is different things that we were taught through training over the years and doing, whether it's contract security for corporate events or corporate details, or doing disaster deployment, or working in high-risk, low-income areas, or even just transporting prisoners across the U.S. and different things. You have to learn what those anomalies are. And a lot of that, for me, was a lot of time and money and experience. And this is to help you, so where you don't have to go through all that time and spend all that money and get some experience. This gives you and helps you with that foundation. Now feel free, if you have any questions or comments, I don't have a problem helping you, okay? So you got your code white. This is where you're feeling pretty secure. You're just pretty much unaware of your surroundings. You're kind of sitting around at the house, watching the TV, not really paying a lot of attention to what's going on. You know, it's been a long, stressful day, week, whatever, and now you're just ready to kick back and relax, right? You're not really aware of your surroundings. Your awareness is pretty switched off. And this is what those attackers look for, right? Crime. A lot of it is an opportunity. They're looking for that wounded zebra or that distracted zebra. Our cell phones, they're a great asset, but they can be a very high vulnerability. You know, pay attention. When I'm talking about doing different drills, another one that I tell people, go to the bank, and if you got to go to the ATM, great. Add in another 5 or 10 minutes. Sit in your vehicle and watch that ATM and see how many people approach it that are oblivious to anybody around, that are going in and out of a bank and walking out with an envelope full of money, or prospectively money, right? They're walking in and out of a bank, so you assume that if they have a bank envelope, it's probably got money in it. Or they're walking up to that ATM, and what are they doing? They're talking on their phone, they're texting, they're looking on Facebook, all sorts of other areas, right? But are they aware? No. Now what do? They walk up there with their bank card, type in their code, get out their money, turn around. Well, if you were a bad guy, would you look for that type of person? Yes. So do you want to be that type of person? No. Code yellow. This is where you're cautious. This is what is recommended that you're typically in. You're aware of your surroundings, you're aware of any anomalies, you are aware of what that baseline for that environment, depending on the location, the climate, and the time of year, special event, all that. You're aware of that. Your state of awareness is just about moderate level, but it's also a very relaxed alertness. You're not walking around really tense, just ready for the sky to fall, ready to get into an altercation, right? Unfortunately, you can get some folks that go out there and they get their concealed carry permit, and because they're not confident, because they haven't had enough training or they didn't have good quality training, they get out there and now they feel like everybody's watching them. So they're constantly touching and reassuring themselves, oh yep, gun's still there. Oh yep, still there, thank goodness. And so that's one of those tells that you can see if somebody's not used to carrying a concealed carry or a concealed firearm or a knife or anything like that. But it's a tell. Your awareness is a 360-degree peripheral awareness, and it's of such environmental danger spots, secluded doorways, dark hallways, walking up to your vehicle, especially at night. You're also any psychological triggers such as the adrenal dump and attacker ruses, right? So, just like magicians use. They're going to show you the left hand, but you're not going to know what the right hand is doing, right? Criminals get the same thing when they get that adrenal dump too, but they're going to get that tunnel vision, right? Well, so are we. If we see something going on, we're going to get that tunnel vision and we're going to focus just on that. And our peripheral vision is going to narrow to where it looks like we're looking down a tunnel. From personal experience, it's very true. And through training and learning to breathe, and from confidence, you learn to deal with it and help that perceptual narrowing not affect you as much as it can. You got to be aware of people. You got to be aware of the vehicles, where they are, that environment, that location. large objects, dumpsters, different things like that, dark areas, etc. Remember that nighttime, that the natural fear of the unknown, the uncertainty, it does kick in. You know, you hear a noise at night. You take somebody out that's never been camping, right? You set up a tent, you do all that, you get them squared away. You're like, oh, this is gonna be a great night. We're gonna wake up, be out here with the woods. And what do? Hey, what was that? Oh my gosh, what was that? Was that a bear? You could be in the middle of a playground or in your backyard, and you're like, no, we don't really get bears out here. But an armadillo, you learn, sounds very loud and a lot bigger than it really actually is. Why? Because that fear of the unknown. You're in that tent, and you're not familiar or comfortable with your surroundings. So everything you hear is, oh my gosh, is the sky falling? So pay attention. You know, think about this. You're walking up to your vehicle, especially during holiday season. This is really important to pay attention to. There's all these midnight sales, different things like that. Well, criminals know a lot of times people have large amounts of money or very valuable objects, jewelry, toys, different things like that with them. Well, what is that? That's opportunity. What are they going to do? Odds are they can take advantage of it, right? So what do you need to do? Well, keeping in mind, if you walk out to your vehicle, and it could be a very long day, but you're walking out to your vehicle and you notice another vehicle parked right up next to your vehicle, most people are going to go, not a big deal. Maybe it took you 10 minutes or 30 minutes to find a parking space, and you know, oh, well, obviously that parking space was there. Well, then you notice that they happen to be parked on your driver's side. Okay, not that big of a deal. Passenger side of their vehicle is facing your driver's side, especially if it's a van or something like that. Okay, still not a big deal. Well, as you start to get closer, you notice maybe that the vehicle is running, or that you can see people inside the car. Oh, well, you know, they're probably just waiting for that vehicle to warm up. It is kind of cool out here. Maybe they're talking on the phone. Well, what are you doing? You're making excuses to go get closer to that. Why? Well, you're starting to notice some anomalies that really don't fit the baseline. So what should you do? Well, you have multiple different options, right? You can go ahead and approach that vehicle, see what happens. Now you're just spinning the roulette wheel, right? Or you can approach the passenger side of your vehicle first. Instead of approaching the driver's side where it's really kind of crunched in maybe to get to your vehicle, now you're approaching that passenger side, so you've got a little bit more room and you've got reactionary time, right? Well, as you start to get closer, does their movement key on your movement? I.e., as you close the distance to your vehicle, do you see them starting to open doors or paying attention to you more? And if they do, what do? Well, I would recommend, if at all possible, you just go ahead and leave, right? That doesn't mean get in your car and go. Try to go back to where you came from, back into the store. Maybe there's security or something like that. Or it's a late night and you're one of the workers there, right? Ask security. A large amount of businesses do have some sort of a security presence. Or if you happen to have a law enforcement presence there, you can always ask and say, hey, would you mind escorting me? Hey, I just happened to notice when I was looking out my window or out the door, there's actually kind of a strange vehicle over there. Would you mind escorting me over there? What else could you do? Well, of course, you could get on the phone and start talking to somebody and say, hey, just to let you know, I'm on my way to my vehicle. There is another vehicle, give a description of it, stuff like that. And just kind of give them a play-by-play, right? The other option, look, those electronic devices on our keys, a great option. Why? Most criminals don't like noise, right? Why? Noise attracts attention. How many times have we accidentally set off our little alarm on the car? We get a little bit fumble fingers or butter fingers or whatever. We're trying to get the groceries out and we get that alarm off on the car. Well, what's that going to do? It's going to start to cause noise. What do most criminals not want to hear? Noise. It's going to attract attention. It's highly possible that they may leave. Not guaranteed, but possible. Now, if that doesn't happen and they still get out or they start to close the distance, then you need to look at other options, right? Now, those other options are going to be up to you. We're not going to talk about that in this video. But, you can kind of guess of where other options might go from there, right? Code orange, okay? Now you're in danger. You approach that vehicle, you notice their movement's kind of keying on your movement. Now that's not good, right? That anomaly is not fitting the baseline. So now you're evaluating that threat, right? So you stopped, you're thinking, hey, what's going on here? You're really observing that situation, that car, the people in it. Is there anybody else around here? Should I go back? What time is it? You know, all those different things. Now, of course, the possible target has been identified, i.e. that vehicle. The situation that is drawing your attention could present a major problem. Or someone may be giving some either oral indicators as, hey, I'm going to get you, or I'm going to kick your butt, you know, whatever. And they can be direct threats or just using suspicious language, right? And what are they going to do? Or what are you going to do again? Remember that tunnel vision, that perceptual narrowing? Now you're going to focus on that attacker, right? They're drawing your attention. They're being very noisy. That could be a ruse. They could be drawing your attention because they've got somebody else coming in from the other side to get you. Is it probable? Depends on your location, your environment, time of year, you know, are you dressed in very flashy clothing? Kind of vehicle are you driving? Different things like that, right? You, as they will be doing, are going to need to be checked to see if there's any avenues of escape, right? You're going to be looking for any potential weapons that are available, whether it's something that you personally have on yourself, and if the others around you, if there are any, are either friend or foe. Are they trading glances back and forth with that person? Is it somebody that you happen to know that's kind of stepping up? What is anybody else around you doing to that environment? And that's where you get to that stop, think, observe, and you're making a plan, okay? So you kind of formulated a plan as you've approached, and you've decided to either approach, not approach, set off your alarm, go back for help, make a phone call, whatever your plan is, that's where you go ahead and you make that plan. And you go, you know what? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take action with this. Something's not right, and you know what? These anomalies are too much. I've noticed several of them. So I'm going to go ahead and take that action. And depending on what the stimuli of that environment is, depending on the escalation of that action that you're going to utilize. Code red. It's hit the fan. Now you're in conflict, right? Now you're trying to avoid that threat if at all possible. Why? Do you really want to try to get into a fight if at all possible? No. You may have all sorts of training and background, and that's great. But you don't know what that other person is or is not bringing to the table, and now you're starting to spin that roulette wheel, right? Okay, so now you got that fight or flight. Are you going to defend? Are you going to posture, make yourself bigger, louder to try to help throw off it? Or are you going to be more submissive? Okay, you have evaluated the situation. Now that you know there is a threat, are you fighting or are you running? Or are you posturing to hope that maybe you're big enough or loud enough that they'll go ahead and back down? Again, never stand and fight if you do have the possibility to get out of there, right? Again, we've carried out that decision, and now you need to act upon it, be aggressive with it, be decisive with it, not second guess it, and follow through with it. If you have to use physical defense, self-defense techniques because they're necessary, only use the level of force appropriate to the threat, right? Don't escalate the level of force over and above what they are. In other words, if somebody's yelling and screaming different oral insults or whatever at you, that doesn't mean you can escalate to a higher level of violence utilizing some sort of a weapon or something. Just because somebody is rude doesn't mean you can go up there and stab them with a knife. And unfortunately, there are sometimes what you see on different social media areas where you get a lot of armchair quarterbacks and they're watching a video or different things like that, and they're suddenly telling you what you should or should not have done. The reality is you are the one that's there. You are the boots on the ground, and you invariably are the first responder because you're already there. So get some training. Get to understand what that baseline is and start working on it and training on it, right? So using these color codes, you never want to be in white. You always want to be in yellow, right? Always got to be aware. You always got to be alert. You need to be fluid. You need to be able to smoothly shift from yellow to orange and back and forth. Hopefully you don't have to go to red, but if you do, you need to be able to do it very smoothly. And if you can move from yellow to orange to red, and that transition is very smooth, then that will build that confidence. And think about when thens, not if thens. When this person closes the distance, what will I do? What are my options? Where can I go? What would you do if somebody jumped out of the alley just ahead of you? What would you do if somebody walking in front of you suddenly cuts your path and raises his hands towards you? That's that flinch. Whoa. Okay. Try not to escalate that level of force, right? Now you do have to take that time. Again, action versus reaction. They initiated that action by jumping towards you. Now you're having to recognize, oh, what are their hands doing? Is there anything in them? You know, are they coming towards me? All this stuff has to happen in a very quick time. And with training, it will happen a lot smoother. So that will end it. But as you can see from this diagram here, these are the next steps that we will be going through. Okay, so we started with the baseline. We're going to move to kinesics next tomorrow. Then we'll move to biometrics. Then we'll move to proxemics. Then we'll move to geographics, followed by iconography, and then finally atmospherics. And that will bring us into what all these domains of situational awareness are and what you're supposed to be looking for. All right. Now this can be very much in depth, but we're going to try to keep with the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid. One of the great books that I highly recommend, other than Colonel Jeff Cooper's Principles of Self-Defense, is going to be Left of Bang. It's written by Patrick Van Horn, and it's a great reference. It does go a lot more in depth on all these different areas, but I'm not going to go into all that depth because they have a book on it and they have their own presentations and everything, but it is a great reference for you. You know, this is all the different things over the years that I've had to learn, like I said, the hard way, and spending a lot of time and money. So I want you to be able to understand what that situational awareness is and what you're actually looking for. And so that sums up what the baseline is. Okay, remember that baseline is what you're forming of that environment and making sure that it fits that time, that location, that climate, that place, whether or not it's a special event, anything like that. You're looking for those anomalies. What does that mean? What isn't happening that normally does? What isn't happening that shouldn't be? Okay? So, if you have any other questions, please feel free to include them in your comments at the bottom. Positive or negative, it makes no difference to me. As an instructor, I'm also a student, so I can only make my presentations and everything better as time progresses. So, and to be honest, if any of you have more experience with the IT side and you have some ideas or recommendations on how to get presentations and everything better, please feel free. I'm always looking to learn new things. But anyways, have a good night and look forward to talking to you tomorrow.